Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the Zero Trust Virtual Summit. We have a great program with a lot of really good speakers. I know I'm personally enjoying it, and I work with this stuff all the time, always learning something new. This presentation is about guiding principles for Zero Trust. If you've been watching CSA's activities, you'll know that we published a series of documents specifically to Zero Trust. The first one that was out the door is the guiding principles, and that's what we'll be going through today. Um, there's really six agenda items here, but really only five we'll be talking to. The resources at the end are really for you. The way I produce these slides and try to run them is that they're atomic units so that when you leave and pick them up in a couple of months, you don't have to remember the presentation itself or see the recording, or if you choose to share it, the idea is people should be able to pick it up and figure it out. So we're going to talk about the principles as a in whole. Then we're going to touch upon three three that are probably the most germane, that get the most amount of attention, that people seem to like the most. We'll talk about next steps of the production and how you can get involved. And then lastly, there's lots of resources at the end for further reading to help you along. So yeah, I'm your presenter, Alex Sharp. Probably should have said that. The most important thing on the slide is that QR code. Feel free to take your smartphone, take a picture, connect with me on LinkedIn. Comments, questions, you're looking for a resource, you want to connect with somebody, you have a Zero Trust initiative you want to talk about, something else going on, feel free to reach out. If I don't know where to point you or don't have the answer, I will find somebody for you, but feel free to connect. CSA is all about volunteers. We're always looking for new perspectives and new contributors. So feel free to reach out and jump in. Long story about me, or a short story about me. I've been in this business, the cyber business, since before it was called cyber. I actually started right out of college working for the intelligence community in what we now call cybersecurity. At the time, we were just starting to use the term InfoSec, right, to date myself a little. But after doing that for a while, I went in and worked on the business side with large consulting firms doing strategy and operational improvement. I like to think having both sides, being good at one makes you stronger at the other. So a lot of the work that I do these days is really about creating value, business value, or completing objectives, but doing it in a safe and secure way. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about me. The Zero Trust document, I'm very proud of this. We were able to get a lot of people to engage and contribute. The list of contributors is actually longer than what's here. Some people contributed and chose not to be included on the list. Others are in an advisory position. So, for example, when we first started mapping out the guiding principles and what they should be, I spoke to a number of luminaries in the industry like John Kindervag and asked him what he thought. I reached out to people in government and all that, and we got a lot of contributions that I think really makes things, it makes it better. It really does make it better. There's an expression, you can go faster alone, but you go further together. The guiding principles document is really an excellent example of that. And if you look at it a little more, you'll notice a lot of the speakers over the next 2 days are contributed to this. So the document itself had a very, very specific audience. And when you look at the audience, it makes sense. We were looking at practitioners in the executive management primarily, right? So you can actually be successful at doing the job, but you can also get the executive buy-in and align with the business value. We looked at the document as also cutting across all guiding principle initiatives. So there was alignment and consistency. We also developed something that could be used by standards bodies and industry organizations to progress the thought leadership and create a body of knowledge. So the idea was we would use the guiding principles to move things forward, fully expecting others were going to build upon that and go longer. Who was it? Sir Isaac Newton used to say that he could see so far because he stood on the shoulders of the giants of others. So it's a very similar thing. We fully expect that others are going to come in and build upon what we've done, and we'll just evolve together. When we set out to do the guiding principles, one of the first things we did was take a look at the various definitions that are out there. NIST is the furthest along, right? At least at the time. ISO did not really have anything that was official in the global community. So we took the zero trust definition from NIST 800-207. And one of the advantages of using NIST is that the documents are free. So you can go do your own research and, kind of check out everything we're doing. But also you'll find that over the years, while NIST and ISO used to be disparate organizations, and sometimes you felt like they were competing with each other, there's actually more alignment between the two than there's ever been before. So we went through the definition and looked at the key phrases that we wanted to carry throughout the guiding principles, right? So one of the things we did was a lot of harmonization to foster adoption and progress the state of the art. The idea is, why create what's already been established, just build upon it. Under that, we looked at drivers, right? So we said, what are our audience? What are the key themes that we want to keep going here? And then what's driving us to do this? The absolute number one thing was there was a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding in the community, which was making things very, very complicated, unnecessarily harder than it should be. When we looked at the guiding principles, you'll notice that a lot of the people that contributed and were consulted on it are actually practitioners running the efforts. So we asked them, what's your biggest challenge? Right. And this was undoubtedly in the top three. I want to say it was in the top three of everybody we talked to. Then closely following that was the misalignment. Now, we've known this for quite some time, that traditional security architectures and the way we operate today are not aligned, right? So we had to resolve that. And that's mostly coming down to the physical perimeter. We also know that historically, we've treated cyber as a technology problem, but the reality is it's full life cycle. It involves people, process, organization, and it's not just about protection. We have to focus on detection and recovery. And then we built upon that in a lot of ways. And one of the key ones was to never trust, but always verify. All right. That's a key principle within zero trust that needs to be carried throughout. We also looked at reducing total cost of ownership. So not just the direct cost, but the total costs that are incurred through the entire life cycle of a system, from conceptual design, deployment, all the way through until it's actually retired, of how to address all of the issues and all of the dimensions that are in there, because it's a business initiative. And that's the way businesses look at things. They don't look at just the direct cost. They look at the total cost over the total life cycle. And again, we harmonized. This took a lot of work, and I give a lot of credit to the folks who helped do it. When you have a lot of people involved and they're all contributing and they're all reviewing, everybody has their own style. And, we're human, we do that. So going through and harmonizing it, so it not only used the accepted terminology, but also sounded like it was written with a single voice. That took a lot of work, and I think we did an excellent job at it, which makes it more readable. So it was great. And then we're also collaborating with all of the other zero trust groups inside of the Cloud Security Alliance and externally as well. So let's talk about some goods and bads, what it is and what it isn't. And again, I'm not going to read slides. You can read it. But it's not about products and architectures. That was a key driver here. We also found that people were overthinking things. So we made a concerted effort to help folks, kind of clarify and provide direction so they wouldn't overthink it. We also took the philosophy that cyber is being moved into traditional governance, risk management, and compliance practices that have existed within corporate structures and organizations for decades. And now cyber is moving into that world. So we're trying to bake it in and use those accepted practices and terminology where available to get it in there. For example, the average business, if you look at enterprise risk management, the people's data stuff will argue whether is there 90 risks, there are 100 risks, is there 110? There's about 100. Cyber happens to be one of them. And if you look at the Basel Accords, which really drive the financial services sector, they break down risk into 4 categories, one of them being operations, and cyber fits within operations. But other sectors don't abide by that. So we use the principles without being stuck to a sector. This is the cover of the document. And here are the principles. There's 11 of them. There's a part of me that wanted to have 13 just because I think that would be good, especially this time of the year around Halloween. But we got 11 of them. That made sense. And anybody who's familiar with the Jericho initiative, you'll see a lot of similarity here because that was one of the things that we use as inputs. And if you look at the acknowledgments, some of the people that worked on the Jericho Forum actually contributed. For those who aren't aware of, about 25 years ago, Jericho was formed to address what we now call the cloud. And 20 years, they put their principles together. And by the way, the word on the street, urban legend, is it was called the Jericho Forum because the walls came tumbling down. And we'll talk about that a little more in a second. Highlighted are the 4 guiding principles we're going to dig into a little bit more in a second. All the guiding principles fit into 3 broad categories, and this is by design. Now, some guiding principles fit into multiple categories, but you get the idea, right? We wanted to work with established principles and apply them to zero trust. You'll notice that one of the first is, start with the end in mind, right? That is right out of 7 Habits of Successful People. We also talk about quick wins, basic system engineering principle. There's a lot of that. The second group was to provide clarity, right? What were the consistent questions that were being asked? Not only the members, but if you look at the various publications that are out there, the different forums, what were people asking? What were they questioning, right? So we tried to provide clarity there. Not saying we're perfect, but we definitely moved the ball forward. Last one was myth busting. It's not about architecture. It's not about product. They're very, very important. Products and architecture are very, very important, but they don't stand alone. They have to fit into the overall initiative. So like product, it's a question of, are you going with a buy or build strategy? And what are your requirements, right? But then it has to fit into the overall initiative. Let's talk about castles and moats. So this is what the world used to look like. We would take our applications, our data, our email, we'd put everything, we'd collect them all together. We'd put it behind walls and locked doors and guards and maybe sometimes dogs and barbed wire, right? Depending on where you worked, and video cameras and all this stuff. And it was basically these weird IT guys that nobody really understood. We put them in a locked room and give them some pizza, every once in a while, and they would take care of things. And there was a small percentage of people that every once in a while, not often, they would work remotely. And statistically, it turns out pre-pandemic, it was around 9, 10, 11% that people would work 1, maybe 2 days a week outside of the office, and they tended to be technology folks. Right. And by the way, just to clarify, when I pick on the IT guys, I was one of them. So I have a right to do that. But you notice these are very strong walls. We collected all our assets one place and we guarded them, right? That's not the way the world looks anymore, right? Post-COVID, we are more dispersed than ever. So these strong outer walls here, they're more porous than they've ever been. The walls aren't as strong, they're not as thick, we got more holes in them, and the IT stuff that we got on the inside is more complicated than we ever imagined, right? Building systems. Whoever thought building systems? Take a look at poor Target. One of the Target breaches was because of their HVAC vendor. There was another situation where one of the casinos that didn't make the news was actually breached because of the folks that manage their aquariums. Whoever thought? Right? We never thought that way. We have this thing called shadow IT because everybody out there wants IT, right? They want this technology stuff, but they don't necessarily go through the CIO. The business unit buys them themselves. And then we got all this stuff going on. Now we have a 500% increase, literally 500% increase in the number of people who work from home because of COVID. Then we have more applications, more data on the outside because the people that can work remotely are the knowledge workers. They need data, they need applications, right? So that's what happens. And they're using more devices than ever. This does not look like the environment our security architectures were designed to handle. By the way, talking about the forums and all, this is sometimes referred to as deperimeterization. Big fancy word. So inside out, not outside in. Why? Simple. Look at what we had a minute ago, right? There was a time when we can collect all our assets together, put this big, strong physical perimeter around it, and great. We created this big, tough outer shell. Sometimes you could think of it like a Cadbury egg, right? You got the strong outer shell, everything on the inside is gushy. Well, it no longer works that way. So inside out, we use a concept called DAS. And these are capital A's because 2 small A's is data as a service, because we can't have enough acronyms running around. But we have data, applications, assets, services. Right? When you hear services and applications, you can throw in APIs, right? You get the idea. You work with this every day. But the idea now is we can't collect everything in one place because it's everywhere. Right? So what do we need to do? We need to look at it for the value and what we're protecting. We start with the asset that we're protecting. We figure out how to protect it, right? And of course, as we do that, we need to understand how they're interconnected. What are the dependencies? What are the inputs? What are the outputs? What are the secure paths? The easiest way to get that is a data flows. And this is a very long-standing concept. If you've been around for a while, you've probably worked with them, but it's starting to get more and more adoption within the security community and zero trust in particular. You will hear terms like protect surface. Now, protect surface is one of those things that CSA is working on to provide more clarity, because you go out in the industry, you'll see multiple definitions of what it is and what it isn't and how it all works beyond the scope of this presentation, but there is more work going on there. So thinking about those assets for a second, senior management often asks, are we focused on the right thing? And are we investing enough? Right? So are we allocating our capital, which basically comes down to energy, people, and dollars, in ways that are going to create the greatest benefit? Right? So how do we do that? We know the assets that need to be protected. We don't have enough time and energy to do them all. So we can look towards our business impact assessment. And if you're not familiar with that, it's a very long-standing GRC term that you'll find in mature organizations. And it basically is a business decision of what's most important to the organization. This is an excellent way of looking at your assets and determining what needs to be protected in what order. You'll also take a look at what's going on. You'll see that a lot of what we're talking about the DAS and the data flows and the business impact assessment and the inventories and all the stuff we're talking about here is not just CSA saying it's important, but if you look at national and international efforts, we're seeing elements of this across the board. So one of the good things is by following the guiding principles, you're actually helping yourself with everything else. Corporate policy, right? Paper. Most people don't regard paper as important because let's face it, no hackers go, I'm not going to attack that organization. They've got some well-written policies. They got some paper, might get me a paper cut. They don't do that. But what it does do is the corporate policy helps the organization communicate and align their security architecture with the way they operate and the business or the mission, right? Like we were talking about that misalignment before, corporate policies go a great way. And we got to look at what's called the Kiplinger model, right? Who, what, where, when, why, how. We probably all heard this when we were kids, applies to policies. Incidents happen. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because you can actually do a whole lecture on it. Excuse me. But if you follow the CSF, you will see that they actually have 5 phases that you go through. Now, internationally, there's some other models. It always comes down to 3: protect, detect, recover. NIST has it in 5. Very useful, still works. But the key message is as you move from one side to the other, you move from protection to detection to recovery, the focus on technology tends to go down. The focus on people tends to go up. Process is always important. It's only a question of what process, right? So the technology has historically been the role of IT, which it should be, right? Technology problem, technologists understand it, let the technologist handle it. And that's where things start to change. So the boom is the detection phase. Technically, it's a little before that because, incidents start here and you only know about them afterwards, okay? Historically, we've spent a lot of time in protection. Again, it's the IT developing these protections. They do great. But what happens when an incident occurs, right? We haven't spent a lot of time on that until fairly recently. This is actually one of the positive things you can argue that have come out of ransomware because it got a lot of visibility. We've historically scrambled and we're starting to get more and more proactive and we're starting to move out of chaos and maturing through the process. All right. The average time to detect a breach, we're still very weak on detection. Average time to detect a breach is about 300 days. That's 10 months of bad guys in your environment, stealing your data, compromising accounts, stealing your intellectual property, doing bad things, spying on you, all of that, and you don't detect it. So we have to get better at that. One of the guiding principles is to deal with the entire spectrum and focus more on detection. By the way, you'll see numbers that are more around 200 days. That's because that includes ransomware. And the reason I pull that out is because it really doesn't count when the hacker tells you they're in there. And this is where the damage is done. Continuous monitoring, you look at the numbers again, it's not good. It turns out that about 2/3 of attacks are not detected by internal teams. That's got to change. It's got to change. And then you can see the numbers. We talked about the averages. They go up rather dramatically when you start to remove the amount, when you start moving the ransomware attacks. And again, 73 days. That's 2.5 months from the time something is detected to the time it's contained. It doesn't mean you've fully recovered. It doesn't mean you've made corrections. Doesn't mean you've put in compensating controls. 2.5 months later, you have finally contained the breach. Basically, stop the bleeding. Malware attacks are deadly, like ransomware. because the average machine affects, on average, 22 others. So within 2 hops, you're talking 500 people. 10, you're almost 3 hops, about 11,000, quarter a million at hop 4. So in the guiding principles, we talk about containing the blast radius and detecting faster, because the idea is that that limits the impact. It also allows you to recover quicker, and frankly, it doesn't wear out your teams. You'll commonly hear terms like segmentation and micro-segmentation to prevent the spread. Next steps on the document, pretty straightforward. We got the incremental release, we got the release out. It is word heavy and graphics light. Unfortunately, we had planned on getting graphics in, but there was so much demand. We decided to get the document out sooner rather than later, get it in the wild, get people working with it, get some additional feedback, and then we'll fold in the graphics later. We've gotten additional feedback. We're always looking for suggestions, so please, please, please feel free. We are looking for volunteers. We'd especially like people that have, that are interested in helping with the graphics part. We all have our thoughts and all, but folks that can add would be great. We are also putting a guiding principles presentation together, which would allow people to get up to speed rather quickly instead of reading the document. Excuse me. We're doing something very specific. So we're small and medium-sized businesses because they're more reliant on the cloud. They have less resources. They have fewer staff, different model. And then we're working on a few other things with business value, mapping to the cloud matrix, and then also with privacy. Resources, you want to get involved? Joy and Frank are now co-chairing the working group. Unfortunately, I had a step back. I'm still heavily involved, but because of time commitments, I need to step back a bit. So Joy and Frank are running with it. Good people, have a lot of confidence in them. Feel free to reach out. Eric Johnson is our border collie across all things Zero Trust. You can reach out to him, and then you can always reach out to me. Again, Alex Sharp, sharp like a knife. Feel free to reach out. We have a lot of really good resources that are available. These cut across pretty much everything. NSA, CISA, Cloud Security Alliance, federal government, great places to go. This is what the Zero Trust Hub looks like from a Cloud Security Alliance. Everything's there. These are our 4 documents that I think are especially useful. The user pillar is one thing everybody's struggling with. NSA put together an excellent document. Excellent document. Few things I would have done a little differently, but it's an excellent document. Then 4 great places to look for anything to do with Zero Trust or cyber. If you're interested in reading, the canon out of Ohio is always good. Ohio State University. Curated works. And then here's some recommended reading. This is actually the list, the reading list given to cadets at one of the military academies by one of the former deputy directors of NSA with a slight change. I added the cuckoo's egg. Some additional things if you're interested. Okay, again, Alex Sharp, hope you enjoyed the presentation. Please enjoy the rest of the virtual summit. Use your smartphone, connect with me on LinkedIn. If you want anything, you got a Zero Trust initiative, you're looking for an extra set of eyes on, you're looking for a resource, you're looking to volunteer, you're looking to connect, feel free. If I don't have it at my fingertips, I will definitely connect you with the right person. So thanks for taking the time. Please review the document. Anything we can do, feel free. Please reach out. Thank you.